In my ongoing series on 10 albums for Desert Island Exile, I kicked off with Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, specifically the 50th anniversary reissue of that album. And in that video, I talk about the importance of the reissue, being the inclusion of the bonus disc of material. And on this bonus disc, it mainly comprises additional studio recordings by the sextet, mainly of various standards. But it also includes a rather remarkable live performance of So What that occurred in The Hague. And I talk in the video about how it was this live performance, and specifically John Coltrane's solo on this live performance of So What, in conjunction with all the soloing on Kind of Blue, that kind of gave me an avenue of appreciation for John Coltrane's artistry, and it birthed a love of John Coltrane's music, going forward. Now, this live performance came from a concert tour that was done in Europe in the spring of 1960. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about this tour, and specifically, I want to talk about another very remarkable album that I truly love by Miles Davis and John Coltrane. That was actually an alternate venue date on the very same tour. And this is the two-set performance at the Olympia Theater in Paris, March 21st, 1960. Now, the performance on the Kind of Blue bonus disc was done in The Hague, and that was, I believe, April 9th. So it was a little bit later in the tour. This was an early engagement on the tour. And this remarkable performance at the Olympia Theater came out as a European release, a 2-CD European release in 2002. And I'm gonna talk about this incredible album. Now, to begin, just a little bit of background on this tour. So as the tour was approaching, Miles Davis actually lost two of the people from the sextet. Bill Evans and Cannonball Adderley were done. They didn't want to do it. They were ready to move on to their own thing. But Miles Davis still had his incredible rhythm section of Paul Chambers and Jimmy Cobb. And to replace Bill Evans, he just brought in his old pianist, Wynton Kelly, who actually had a very minor role on Kind of Blue. He did perform on one of the tracks. And of course, Miles Davis had worked with him before, and he was a superb pianist, even though he was quite different in style from Bill Evans. So the main part of the band was pretty much solid. And he had Coltrane to hold down the saxophone. But the problem was that John Coltrane was ready to go too. He was ready to move on and become the John Coltrane that we know and love. And obviously, Miles Davis just couldn't have that happen, right? He couldn't lose all three of his marquee players right before this tour. So apparently, he just kind of strong-armed Coltrane into doing the tour, and Coltrane relented. But Coltrane was unhappy and miserable the entire time on the tour, apparently. He was completely antisocial. He would just go off by himself, practicing constantly, meaning practicing all his own stuff, right? And of course, he would show up for the concerts, and oh my heavens, did he show up for the concerts. As you listen across these different concerts, his playing is just absolutely incredible. Just endless soloing, outrageously inventive and exploratory soloing, throwing in like all kinds of like elements of free jazz shit. I mean, it's just an incredible set of performances from John Coltrane. Now, I want to say a little bit more about the various recordings that were done on this tour. There's lots of different bootleg recordings that were executed in the course of this tour, and the quality of these bootleg recordings is pretty uneven. A lot of them, they they are just kind of pretty badly recorded. You know, they range from like audience bootlegs to you know, bootlegs where they just didn't have the sound levels right. It's kind of distorted and all. There are some where the balance of the recording is off, right? It's like the drums are too loud or the cymbals are too loud, and, you know, you can't really hear the bass. That kind of thing happens. There's somewhere where like the hall just doesn't sound good. I don't know if it's just sort of a bad hall, or, you know, if they just got too much reverberation from the performance venue or something, but it's just kind of distracting and all. However, the Olympia Theater performance is clearly, it was done for a radio broadcast for Europe 1. And so it was clearly taken off a soundboard, and really it sounds quite good for what it is. It sounds quite good. Now, the set list at Olympia Theater. The great thing about this set list is that there's very little overlap with Kind of Blue, either the main album or the bonus disc. So in the first set, they played All of You, which is a Cole Porter song. And then they play So What and Green Dolphin Street. Now those two were featured in Kind of Blue, one on the main album, one on the bonus disc. But then the second set is completely new material. So you have Walkin' by Scott Carpenter. You have Bye Bye Blackbird. You have Round Midnight, you know, the Thelonious Monk song. And then you have Aleo, the Sonny Rollins song. You have a kind of a weird and really frenetic version of Aleo on it. So it's really fantastic, right? For anybody that loves that live performance on the Kind of Blue bonus disc. You have a whole other album of material, you know, from this exact period, and there's very little duplication. Now, in terms of performances, you know, on this concert tour, Cobb and Chambers just sound absolutely fantastic every concert date. Like, they are just absolutely rock solid. And honestly, you know, Wynton Kelly is really great on this tour too. He is obviously like quite different from Bill Evans, but his playing is superb. His comping is superb, and honestly, I really enjoy his block chord soloing, and also, like, those three are really solid. If anything, the unevenness on the tour comes from Miles Davis and John Coltrane. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Miles Davis's unevenness, but we are going to talk about Coltrane a bit. So on this Olympia Theater date, John Coltrane is absolutely on fire. To me, it's the best of the entire run in this tour. So let's talk a little bit about his astonishing work on these performances. So in this concert date, there are two of the songs, Walkin' and All of You, where Coltrane's soloing is just, it can only be described as insanely great, just insanely great. It is really at the level of that incredible live performance of So What that's included on the Kind of Blue bonus disc, which is, you know, for me, that is probably my favorite John Coltrane solo of all time, that live performance. Okay, so these two on Walkin' and All of You, John Coltrane is soloing like pretty much at that level. Like it is an absolute treat. And in both of these songs, there comes a moment where he throws in like what I would describe as kind of level 3 free jazz shit. You know, if you think about free jazz, think about it in terms of a scale of 1 to 10, right? In terms of how free a jazz composition is. You know, and say 10 is like Machine Gun by Peter Brotzmann Octet, right? That's 10. So, you know, John Coltrane is maybe at a 2 or probably a 3. So it's not too outrageously crazy. It doesn't go on for too long, but still it's a little bit screwed up sounding in the context of the song. And actually in both instances, the audience starts booing him, or at least part of the audience starts booing him, right? They don't want to hear that shit. Like it's kind of discordant, and maybe they're not sure what to make of it. Like it's an incredible moment, actually. I personally love those moments. But yes, the soloing on those two songs, just incredible. Now, I should also point out that like on a couple more of the songs, Green Dolphin Street and Bye Bye Blackbird, honestly, the soloing is also pretty great. Okay, it might not be quite at the level of the first two, but I would say it's reasonably close. I think in Bye Bye Blackbird, they start booing Coltrane a little bit as well, because he, at the very end of that solo, he kind of loses the plot a little bit, and he just kind of starts like sort of horsing around a little bit too much, and the audience starts hooting, and they went, I guess, to get him back on track or whatever. But no, I mean honestly, those solos are absolutely wonderful. Now, the performance of So What, his soloing is really good on that as well. There are other performances of So What, not just the kind of Blue Bonus disc, but other concert venues where I actually think his soloing is kind of a more of a cohesive whole. But it's still really good, and the same could be said for Round Midnight. Now Aleo, I don't really know what happened on that song. I think that song just kind of came apart in general. It's a very, very strange performance of it. Miles Davis seems kind of lost in it, like he's not even sure what to play, and it's just an absolutely bizarre performance of it. So I don't really know what to make of it, and maybe it's not too surprising that John Coltrane really maybe didn't know what to do in that song. But anyway, like in general, the Coltrane solos on this album are just absolutely marvelous and mesmerizing. This brings up an interesting point of the question of, well, isn't John Coltrane always fantastic? And to me personally, the answer is no. And I mean, generally he is, of course, but he has his moments when he's off, and I think that this concert tour is actually a good example of this. As you listen across the tour, it's funny. It's really obvious that Coltrane, you can just hear in his playing that he doesn't want to be there. He wants to be off doing his own thing. And he is doing his own thing, regardless of his circumstances, right? He's just doing it in the middle of Miles Davis's concert. But with each of these songs, there's kind of a line that sometimes gets crossed. And I would say that the line is that, Coltrane, in his outrageous exploration, right, when he crosses his line, it starts sounding like, just so much kind of horsing around, and the exploration is like a little bit incoherent. And so what is so remarkable about the Olympia Theater performances is that I would say that really never happens in the whole course of the two sets, right? Despite the outrageous exploration in his soloing, the solos have like a very like satisfying kind of overall shape to them, and there's a coherence to the solos, and in particular, like the long phrasing passages, right? They themselves like have a shape and a satisfying resolution, that makes listening to the solo like a really, really pleasing and interesting experience. It's pretty rare that you kind of sit there and think, oh, God, what is he doing there, right? That doesn't really happen. But on some of the other concerts, it does sort of happen a lot. So, in the end, this incredible album, I mean, it's really a godsend for anybody that loves the live performance of So What on the Kind of Blue bonus disc. This album is like a gift from heaven, right? Because it's an example. It's a collection of material where John Coltrane is soloing at that level with that band playing at that level for an entire concert date. And it really doesn't repeat a lot of stuff on Kind of Blue. So it is just an amazing historical document, and it's become like one of my favorite jazz albums to listen to. Now, the other thing about this album that it made me think about was listening to it. It really makes you realize that that Kind of Blue moment, it was actually an extremely brief moment in time, this brief and magical moment that occurred. Because by the time this tour happens, the Kind of Blue moment is over. It's over. Bill Evans is gone, and Miles Davis, I mean, he's back in his old sound, really, right? He has his old pianist back, and he's just kind of moved back, and he sounds a lot like he did right before Kind of Blue. And John Coltrane, by the time of this tour, he's moved on too. He moved forward. John Coltrane is basically doing what he would do for the rest of his career, right? He has just moved on. And, it makes you realize that Kind of Blue, my heavens, it was so remarkable that they were able to craft this incredibly unique sound, whereby like even John Coltrane was sublimating his own artistry to the project of Kind of Blue, right? If you listen to Coltrane's solos on Kind of Blue, right, it's not the hog wild John Coltrane that you hear on these concert dates, right? He's definitely sublimating his playing. And it's that Kind of Blue moment was just this really incredible and very brief confluence of talents that was just never going to last. And by the time you're in this tour, you're actually in a different short-lived moment in jazz, right? Because after this tour, John Coltrane was gone, right? He flies the nest, and he becomes the transcendent John Coltrane that we all know and love. And Miles Davis moves on to his own thing, right? By the time fall 1960 rolls around, Davis does another kind of Blue type tour. But he's got Sonny Stitt on saxophone, and you listen to it, it's really quite a different sounding thing. So, I think that this Olympia Theater performance, it also kind of indirectly, it gives you a new way to appreciate Kind of Blue. How brief and incredible that album was. I mean, and to me personally, it's kind of like the most beautiful thing that was ever done in jazz. And obviously a lot of people must feel that way. And if you look at it through the lens of the tour, you can just see how remarkable that confluence of talent was. And also just be very grateful that we were able to get a little bit more of Miles Davis and John Coltrane together in this incredible tour, of which I think the Olympia Theater gig, March 21st, 1960, was kind of the absolute best representation of what was going on that tour. So I certainly highly recommend hunting down a copy or a recording of the Olympia Theater tour, Olympia Theater concert date. If you can, again, it is certainly one of my all-time favorite jazz albums at this point. And you know, for anyone that is discovering Kind of Blue, it would kind of be the ideal follow-up and evolution out of Kind of Blue to listen to, at least in my opinion. So thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And stay tuned for more installments of 10 Discs for Desert Island Exile. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this series and you enjoy the material on the channel. So anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one.